Then the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. I'm going to talk to us for just a few moments this morning. What I feel like God gave me this morning for this service is this too shall pass. Lord, we worship you. We magnify your name. We glorify you and we exalt you. We know, Lord, right now you're the King of kings and Lord of lords. You know what tomorrow holds, or we don't. You know what the future is, and we know. We trust in you, trust in who you are and what you are, and have faith in your name and faith in the power of your word. So, Lord, you lead us, you guide us, you direct us today, Lord. Let your word speak to us today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Bless you all. Be seated here. This text that we read today comes from this book of Exodus, comes from the story of the exodus of Israel from Egypt. Just a reminder of what's been going on here. I'm sure we're most familiar with the story, but Israel has been in Egypt at this point for about 400 years. One thing that I do find interesting about this was that they were in Egypt for 400 years, but in the process of being there for 400 years, they still maintained their identity as separate from the Egyptians. Because when it talks about the Pharaoh that rose up, in Exodus 1 and 8 said, Now arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. So there was this Pharaoh who became to power, and he did not remember or know about Joseph. He didn't remember the story, didn't know Joseph. And so, but he looked out and he saw that there was a group of people in Egypt that was different from everybody else. That there was a group of people that had a different identity, a different culture, a different worship, and they were distinct enough that he noticed these are foreigners in our land. So I think it's interesting that in 400 years, they hadn't lost their identity. They had maintained that. So they began to put them into slavery, and that's just one of the reasons they put them into slavery, is because they recognized they were different, and that made him concerned. And so they put them into slavery for the purpose of, we're going to beat them down and keep them controlled. And they had originally, we know the story, that originally came to Egypt for the purpose of surviving the famine that was going on in the world at the time. And God had spoke to Joseph through the dream of Pharaoh and told him what was getting ready to come, what was to expect. And Pharaoh listened to Joseph, and because of this, when the 7 years plenty had passed, the 7 years famine had came, and Egypt was prepared to survive this. So when everyone else was running out of food and supplies, Egypt still had a storehouse. And so they ended up coming to Egypt for food. And that's how Joseph said, provided for them. They brought them in. They gave them land to live on. And that's how they ended up in there. But it's been 400 years later, and they haven't left. They stayed there. Now they've become slaves in the land of Egypt. That God has a promised land for them. He intended them to go to and intended them to possess and be a part of, but they're still living in Egypt. But the time had long passed since Joseph had taken place. Since Joseph had saved Egypt. So this time had long passed, and minds had shortened, and memories had waxed dim, and they had forgotten what had taken place. And so they began to oppress Israel and place them into slavery. Now they had been living at the time we're getting to in the story here of Exodus. They've been living for a long time as slaves in Egypt. Still they continue to grow. Still they continue to multiply. And the Pharaoh realized that just putting them as slaves wasn't stopping or bringing about what his intention was. So he decided to up the pressure on them and demanded the slaughter of their sons by the midwives. And Exodus 1 and 16 says, And he said, When you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and you see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. The midwives didn't fear Pharaoh as much as they feared God. So they wouldn't do this. They wouldn't fulfill his command. So then Pharaoh told the Egyptians, take all the boys and throw them in the Nile. He said, okay, the midwives, you won't do it, and I'll put it on the people of Egypt to do it. So this is what the children of Israel are living under at the time of our text. They've been slaves for years. They've been put under pressure and under bondage. They're seeing their children killed in front of their face. A newborn comes and they're faced with this fear of that someone will come and take this child from us. So this is where they're living. This is the oppression they're living under. And that's where we come to in our text today. They are no doubt living in fear. We see this by how Moses' parents react when they find out that they're pregnant with a child, and they find out the response they have, and they realize it's a boy. And then she finally tries to hide him in the ark and the bulrushes in the river. So they said, we know by this that they're living in fear. You know they're tired. They're wore out. You know they're hopeless. They don't see any way that this ends, any way that this changes. They're broken. They're hurting. They're oppressed. They're the oppression of this government and the oppression of these people pushing down on them. And this is where they're living at. Hope is gone. Fear is around them everywhere. They don't see a way out of this. They don't see hope in the future. Then Moses and Aaron walk back into Egypt and the plagues begin. They go to Pharaoh and say, you need to let my people go. And of course we know Pharaoh rejects and doesn't listen. And so because of that, they face the plagues. First was the Nile was turned to blood. Then the frogs. Then the lice or gnats. Then the flies. Then the livestock was killed. Then the boils. Then the hail. Then the locust. And the darkness. They go through these 9 plagues. Moses and Aaron have come back. They've told the children of Israel, we're going to lead you out. And 9 plagues have come and gone. Still nothing has changed for the children of Israel. Still living in bondage. Still living in fear. Still filled and surrounded by hopelessness. Maybe for a moment when Moses and Aaron came back, they began to say, maybe this is the end. And then that was quickly replaced with dread as Pharaoh reacted and said, instead, because of what you're doing now, I'm going to put more on you. They were still slaves. They were still in bondage. And the pressure became greater. Exodus 5:9 tells us, let there be more work laid upon the men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. He says, you want to talk about going and worshiping. You want to talk about going and praise. He goes, evidently, you got too much time on your hands. Put more work on them. So all this looks like to the people of Israel is Moses has stirred Pharaoh up. What was bad before seems to be worse now. What seemed unbearable before seems even more unbearable now. The pressure is greater. Looks like he's made it worse for them. They're still slaves, but their jobs and tasks are more difficult. They take some of the supplies they need to supply their jobs and say, still continue to do them. So when this began, maybe with Moses and Aaron first walking in, they thought this is about to end. But as it begins to go on, they realize this has gotten worse and not better. Many turned on Moses and Aaron saying, you're just making it worse. Their hope was gone. They saw only a future of dying as a slave and their children dying as slaves. But God had other plans for them. They have seen 9 plagues that have come and gone in Egypt, and nothing is better. They did not believe that this will pass and that a new day is coming. Their hope was gone. But then Moses says this in Exodus 12:1-2. The Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. He comes to them, he then relays this message to the children of Israel. Because I want you to understand, when this month begins, this is going to be the beginning of the year for you. This is going to start a whole new day, and a whole new chapter, and a whole new era in your life. I want you to understand, when this month begins, it's not going to be the same from here on out. It will be forever different when this month begins. Everything is about to change. He tells them that this beginning is a new year for you. They were living in Egypt. So I had to go look this up. I didn't know this. And the calendar that the ancient Egyptians used, I wondered when was their first day of the month, or first day of the year. They celebrated the new year in July, is when their new year began. So this takes place, when what we're talking about here, the Passover takes place in April, beginning of April. So you're sitting there, and they're 4 months ahead of where the new year begins. But Moses is telling them, I want you to understand what you've been thinking was 4 months away. What you've been thinking was still a ways off this new year. I'm telling you, in your house and in your land and your people, your new year starts now. It's going to be a new day, and it's going to be a new time. He's telling them it may look like you have 4 more months of this year left, but today is the beginning of a new year and a new season. He told Moses, tell the children of Israel, on the 14th day, you get the lamb as you've been preparing. You kill it and you eat it. And he goes, and then you get your coat on. You get your shoes on. You have them tied up. You pack your bags. You have them sitting by the door, because tomorrow you're leaving. When just a few days before this, there was no hope. No glimmer that this was ever going to end. Moses comes and lets them know, on the 15th, you're walking out of here and you're going to leave this place. Exodus 12:31-36. Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron during the night after the Passover takes place. The firstborn has died throughout the land of Egypt. Pharaoh doesn't wait till the next day. He calls for them in the middle of the night. He says, get out, he ordered. Leave my people and take the rest of the Israelites with you. Go and worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, but bless me as you leave. All the Egyptians urged the people of Israel, get out of the land as quickly as possible. They thought, we will all die. Israelites took their bread, dough, before yeast was added. They wrapped their kneading boards in their cloaks and carried them on their shoulders. And the people of Israel did as Moses had instructed. They asked the Egyptians for clothing and articles of silver and gold. The Lord caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the Israelites, and they gave the Israelites whatever they asked for. So they stripped the Egyptians of their wealth. He told them, on the 15th, you're walking out of here. You're leaving. Be prepared, because this is going to pass. This is going to be over, and it's a new season and a new day for you. This isn't always going to be like this. Israel kept looking only at what they could see and what they could hear and experience. They kept thinking this is how it's always going to be. Hope had left them. They lived in fear. They lived in dread. They were turned on Moses and Aaron. But God was doing something they couldn't see. They didn't know about what God was preparing in the background. They saw no end in sight for this. But God was telling them this is a new time and a new beginning and a new start for you. Everything is going to change. You will no longer be slaves. You will have your own land. You will build and plant and raise families in freedom. This is going to pass. You will not be slaves forever. Matter of fact, it's ending this month. It's over. It is done. Sometimes we mistake the present struggle with our future. We think, when we look around at what we're going through, what we're dealing with, what we struggle with, we think, how is this ever going to change and how is this ever going to end? Our country right now is in a lurch. Don't know what to expect tomorrow. You read the news or you see the news, and every day it's something different. You see conflicting reports all day long. One is the world is dying today, and another one is maybe it's not as bad as we think it is. And so you got everything from one end to the other. And sometimes we can look at this and these situations in our own life and begin to think the present is what the future has to be. But if you've lived at all any length of time, you know time keeps clicking on. Time keeps rolling on. And things that you thought would never change and never get better, if you lived a little while, you understand they do get better. And they do change. And we do know that God is faithful. And we do know that God is a miracle worker. And we do know that God is faithful to us. If we're faithful to Him, He's faithful to us. We do know that He restores. And we do know that He removes hindrances. So we can't look at what we're looking at today square in the eyes and say this is how it's going to be or this is going to be the end, because God is writing the book. He is writing our story, and He's the one that's going to have the ending written. But have faith in Him and trust in Him and say, this too shall pass. Israel was taking the fact that they've been slaves for this time. It can't be different. No, it will be different. They were a people that was called out. He had made promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and He hadn't forgotten them, and He wasn't going to forget them. That's why Moses and Aaron were standing there, because God had not forgotten them. This shall pass for them, and this too shall pass for us. Jesus was talking to His disciples when they were in Samaria in John chapter 4. Remember, they were on the way, and they went to the well in Samaria, and Jesus met the lady at the well, and the disciples went on in to get food and come back and find Jesus there. And He begins to talk to them. In the process of this, He talked to the lady at the well, and she went back to Samaria, to the city, and she was telling them who Jesus was and what He had told her. And she is on her way back at that moment with a crowd of people to hear what Jesus has to say. And in this moment of nothingness looks like, they don't know what transpired while they were gone. They didn't see the conversation at the well. They didn't know this had taken place. They just knew He was there when they left. They come back and He's there by Himself now. So they don't know what all's going on. And Jesus looks at them and He says, you know the saying, 4 months between planting and harvest. But I say, wake up and look around. The fields are already ripe for harvest. See, they were locked into the mindset of this is what we see, this is what we know, and this is what we understand. What they didn't know, what they didn't see was what God was doing while they weren't there. What they didn't see. There's a lot of things that God does, and God is in the process of moving and working and shaking. And we're sitting there going, well, all I see is there's nothing. There's nothing here. There's no hope. Nothing changing. Nothing's going to be different. He says, would you look up over there? There's a crowd of people coming this way to hear what I have to say. The harvest is now. Because you think you control the seasons. I control the seasons. If I say it's harvest time, it's harvest time. And it's harvest time right now. All we got to understand is what we're looking at in our natural eyes, in our natural understanding of things. We got to look at that and say, okay, but I know one who's greater than what I see naturally. And what he says and what he's doing is greater than this. God alone controls seasons and times. Amen. We can only make judgments of what we see, but God is telling us this too shall pass, and quickly. Don't let your present circumstances steal your hope, your faith, your future, your joy. One of the things the devil works in the most is fear. It's one of his greatest weapons is fear. And I've said this before and I'll keep saying it. But the scripture says the devil is as a roaring lion. It doesn't say he is. Right. It says he is as. In other words, he's imitating. And what the most fearful thing, he says he's roaring, trying to get you scared, trying to get you to run, trying to get you to flee. When in reality it is nothing behind the curtain. Right. Don't let fear in your present circumstance steal your hope, steal your faith, steal your future, steal your joy. Because God is still on the throne and God is still in control. God has got this and God has got you. My faith is in Him. My faith is not in Donald Trump. Don't get offended. My faith is not in the Surgeon General. My faith is not in any doctors that's talking to us every day. Thank God for them, do great jobs. But my faith is in Him. Yeah. He has my future. He's the one who said, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you. He's the one who said, I've carved you in the palm of my hands. He's the one who said that. Amen. My life is in His hands. The doctor told Candy, you got cancer. You need to get chemo. God said, no, you don't, and you didn't. Chemo was canceled. But the natural says this, but God, until God's done with the story, we don't know what the end's going to be. Don't look at the immediate and say, this is what this, and begin to solve it. Well, from here we go to here, and then we go over here, and then we go to there. And God's in the middle of this yet. And we sometimes we rock Him out of the equation. When He's in the equation, the answer is always in His hands and always in His care. And don't let what you see presently disrupt your faith. Hang on to Him. He's the one who's got this in control. God has got this, and God has got you, and God has got our country, and God has got our future, and God knows what tomorrow is going to hold, next week's going to hold, and next year's going to hold, until the time He comes back for a church. And I'm trusting Him to protect and take care and keep and lead and guide and direct us. I refuse to let fear dictate my emotions and my actions. Right. Amen. Psalms 34 through 6. 11 through 12, I'm reading from the New Living again. It says, sing to the Lord, all you godly ones. Praise His holy name. For His anger lasts only a moment, but His favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. When I was prosperous, I said, nothing can stop me now. You have turned my mourning into joyful dancing. You have taken away my clothes of mourning and clothed me of joy, that I might sing praises to you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. We may be in a moment of mourning and maybe not knowing what's happened, but I can tell you this, God controls the mourning, and this too shall pass. And my faith in who we are needs to come out on the other side, shining and full of glory of who the King of Kings is and who the Lord of Lords is, and say, God, I'm walking in your steps, and I will be led by you, and I will not let fear control and lead me. This too shall pass. As Israel said in Egypt, slaves for years and years have been in slavery. And that's the only reality they could see and the only reality they could understand. As we can sometimes sit and struggle and sit in circumstances and sit in things that we have been pronounced on us or that we're looking at and let fear control us and we say, maybe that's all that can happen. No, God is not done with this yet. I do know this, and it is a promise. All things work together for good to them who love Him. And called according to His purpose. God says, I've got you. I've got plans for you. I've got a purpose for you. This too shall pass. We will come out victorious on the other side. We need to understand weeping may last for a little bit, but joy is coming. Hope is coming. Peace is coming. There's a new day dawning. There's a new year dawning. We say, well, it's not time for the new year yet. When God steps in, it doesn't matter what the calendar says, what the season says. When God steps in and says, it is time, it is time.
Praise God. Amen.
If we could stand. Worst thing we can do is let fear make us make rash decisions. We got people in our culture, in our country, in our culture, in our media that do nothing but peddle fear. It's all they thrive on, all they live on. It may make them money off a click on a website or just to peddle fear and hysteria. We can't let that rule us and grip us and control us. We got to walk in the faith of who He is and who God is. The children of Israel said that night in their house, they were still slaves. While they were still slaves, they packed their bags. While they were still slaves, they ate the Passover lamb. While they were still slaves, they put the blood over the door. While they were still slaves, they had their shoes on, waiting by the door. While they were still slaves. Nothing had changed yet. All they had was a promise. Tomorrow is a new day. And they finally begin to believe this too shall pass. In the middle of the circumstance, in the middle of the turmoil, in the middle of the diagnosis, in the middle of the situation, we'll look at it and say, I know who my God is. And this shall pass. And I will be victorious on the other side. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you today for your presence. Thank you today for your word, God. I ask you, Lord, to lead us, to guide us, and to direct us, Jesus. It's your spirit, your anointing be on our hearts, our minds, God.
I'm no longer
praise your name. We glorify your name, God. Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah, Jesus. I praise your name, God. Hallelujah, Jesus. This is why it's so hard for me just to say. Even if it's just, honestly, this is more than we had our first service here. So we're still up from that. But it doesn't matter. If it's just me and Christy and Zach and whoever else, I still want to have service. That's all it's here. Because there's just something about worshiping God together. And I don't begrudge anybody who wants to stay home during this time. You're responsible for your health and your decisions. But as long as like we can do this moment, because I just love to feel the presence of God moving together. So, Lord bless you all. God, great week. Please be